All right, everybody, welcome to our first in our series of dam safety webinars in the DNR. This is John Garton with the Iowa DNR Dam Safety Program. I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. As I'm looking out the window here, I was thinking maybe we should have done this yesterday because it's a nice kind of rainy, dreary day and would have been good to sit inside and watch a webinar. And now we've got pretty beautiful day, and those of you that are joining us probably might have been nice to go outside over your lunch break. At the DNR, we're working from home like a lot of you are, so I'm doing this from our home, and I also have Casey Welty on the line in our program, and he'll be helping out as well. And this is kind of our first time doing a major webinar like this, so hopefully everything goes smoothly. We are recording it, but hopefully if there's some little bugs, we'll work through them as we go. Some of the logistics of today's meeting. We have muted all of your lines. We're going to do about 3 question and answer breaks. If you notice in your webinar control box, there's a question section, and you can ask a question at any time by typing it in that box. So as I'm going through things, and if you think of something you'd like to ask, go ahead and type it in there. And then when we come to a break, we'll go through those questions. So don't be shy. And then, we can unmute lines. So we may test that out at the end if we have time, if we're all feeling brave and we want to, if someone's really dying to make a comment or speak up at the end, we may have you raise your hand using the raise hand feature, and we can unmute people if you need to ask a question that way. But as we go through, we're just going to stick to having you type in your questions, and then as we get to breaks, we'll try to go through those and address them best we can. Same thing if you have a technical issue. Hopefully everything's working well, you can hear me well on your end, but if not, go ahead and type it in that box, and we'll keep an eye on those, and hopefully we can make adjustments if something's not working right. And we are recording this, as I said, and we're going to post this. So if you know people that you think would benefit from seeing this, we're going to post it and they can watch it at a later time. And then also in the webinar feature here, there's a section called handouts, and I posted several documents in that section. One is kind of a handout for today's webinar. It links to a lot of other resources that I'm going to mention as we go through. So you'll see, I'll bring up a slide and I'll say, hey, here's a useful YouTube video you could watch in the future, or a website you can visit for more information. I put all those links into this handout, so you can download that PDF and click those links later on when you have time. You don't have to try to write them down or pull up the recording. A couple other useful handouts are for our program of when a permit's needed from us and how to apply for a permit. Those are useful documents. We do have a dam maintenance manual that we send out to new owners, and that's on our website, and I've also attached that here in our handouts section. And then I've also put a copy of today's PowerPoint slides. So if you want to go through the slides at a later time, something was useful, or you want to go back and look at something, you can download a PDF of the PowerPoint and look through those later. So as many of you know that signed up, this is first in our series that we're trying this month of May, as many of us are working from home. That would be a good time. So we've kind of, today we're going to do the basics of Dam 101 and our dam safety program. And then we kind of get increasingly more technical as the weeks go on. Next Wednesday will be dam failures and proper maintenance. And then we get into dam ownership, about, how do you hire an engineer? How do you find engineers? Those sorts of things. And then the final week will be the most technical of all, and that's almost geared toward a lot of our engineers and engineering consultants that are work with us frequently. But anyone's welcome to join that one. That one will really dive into the details of best practices for designing dams. And also we've got some potential rule changes coming up about our criteria and stuff. So we're going to dive into those as well. So I'm going to try and launch a poll here using our software, just to learn a little bit about who we've got on the line. So hopefully you're all seeing a poll pop up on your screen, and you can pick one of the answers there, and it must be up because I'm seeing some answers come in. And we'll give that about 30 seconds or so for you to be engaged a little bit and let us know what brought you here today. Once I kind of see it slow down here, I'll close and post it. All right. And I'll share that with you all, hopefully here. So we can see that we have a few dam owners. We've got about 40% that are either own a dam or are responsible for dams, actually 50%. And then we've got some consultants on the line, and we've got some that are thinking about building a dam, and then we have a lot that are just generally, of course, you could pick more than one as well. I think I had it set up as. So hopefully you all have interest in dams as well. That's why you're here. So that kind of helps me know too who I'm talking to. And now I'm going to try to go back to, I think I have to reshare my screen. Yeah, okay, I think you're still seeing my screen again. All right. So now that we know a little bit about you, this is us. I'm John Garton. This is my contact info that you can have for later reference. Also on the line, helping today is Casey Welty, and we kind of consist of primarily of the two dam safety engineers here at the DNR that implement the dam safety program. You can always reach out to either one of us with any questions you have about dams around the state. So a little outline of what we're going to talk about today. You know, why do we have dams? What are the types of dams? We'll look at what are the dams we have around Iowa. I've got some examples. Many people don't realize how many we have and what kinds we have. Then we're going to dive into, you know, what makes up a dam? What are the parts of a dam? What goes into designing a dam? Just very basics of that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about dam safety programs and dam safety in the U.S. Why do we have regulations? Why do we care about keeping dams safe? And then, you know, what do we do here at the DNR? And then talking about downstream risk and risk reduction. So, you know, why do we have dams? Dams have a lot of different purposes. Dams are built for water supply, you know, so we can store water during rainier seasons and use it through drier seasons. We use dams to hold back floods. We can store water and release it slower to reduce downstream flooding. We build a lot of dams just for fishing and recreation. Along with that, we're building more and more wetland dams that are useful for water quality improvements and fish and wildlife creation as well. And then erosion control has also been a high use of dams throughout the state. As streams erode, you can build a dam that kind of provides a check on that erosion of the stream and slows down some of that degradation. Of course, we build dams to have water for our livestock. And then oftentimes we just build dams because we like the look of water and we like how that enhances our property values and just general aesthetics. So types of dams, earthen dams and rockfill embankment dams are really the bread and butter, the primary dams throughout the country and Iowa. We don't have a lot of rock-filled dams in Iowa. We can generally build our earthen dams homogeneous, meaning that we have enough clay in most of our locations where we build dams that we can do a single clay embankment here in Iowa. Obviously, the type of dam that a lot of people think of when you say dams is the Hoover Dam, and that's a concrete dam, which you see on the right here. The dam on the left is an example of one of our concrete dams in Iowa. This is at Iowa Falls, larger concrete dam for hydroelectric power. And then we have some more unusual kinds of dams. These are called Obermeyer spillway dams, and these are dams that are held in place by a rubber bladder that holds up a steel gate. So these can be raised and lowered to pass higher flood flows and those sorts of things. And then of course we have our most common dam, or another dam most people think about, is our beaver dams, one of our biggest dam builders. So if we think about dams around Iowa, I'm going to talk about some different examples. Here's a water supply dam. This is 12 Mile Creek Lake down in Union County. It's 66 feet tall. I will try to kind of highlight the dams as we go through here. So this is the dam embankment for this impoundment, and over here we have a spillway, which we'll talk about later. This is a dam in Guthrie County for Lake Panorama. Primary use is recreation and property value. So you can see we have a huge development community around this lake. Dam embankment sits down here. There's two spillways, a primary concrete and an overflow section. Then we have a lot of smaller dams as well. So this is a smaller development dam in Polk County here, Waterford Dam at 40 feet, and only has a 5-acre surface area, but is also used to enhance property values. A lot of our counties over the years have built dams to create lakes for fishing and camping and recreation. This is a Badger Lake Dam in Webster County, 46 feet tall, makes a 270-acre lake. And then of course we have a lot of rural farm ponds, and this is kind of a little bit of a bigger one. This is in Crawford County, and it's a 46-foot tall dam and creates a 38-acre impoundment there. And then we do have several hydroelectric smaller dams around, relatively smaller for hydroelectric projects in Iowa. This is one on the Maquoketa River in Jackson County at 26 feet tall. This is kind of a combination dam. We have a large concrete structure here, spillways and powerhouse. And then to the side, we have a larger earthen embankment too that helps hold the river back. And that one's in active hydroelectric production. And then one of our largest problems in Iowa is sedimentation, and our lakes and ponds do silt up over time. And so in order to dredge those impoundments, this is Cedar Lake here in Madison County, they build commonly a lot of sediment containment dams. So there's actually a dam that goes around these two little ponds, and these were built to contain hydraulic dredging, so pumping that silt out of one lake into the other so the silt can settle out and the water can return to the primary lake. And then this silt is contained and dewatered over time and can be reused for other purposes in the future. But we do see more and more of these dams built purely for containing sediment and dredging. And then not all dams hold water on a permanent basis. Here's an example of a dry flood control dam. This is in Blackhawk County, Verdon Creek Dam. From the north here, from above, we have Verdon Creek flows in. When Verdon Creek is in a high flood stage, the dam kind of goes into action and stores water up in this farmland and reduces flooding impacts to the city of Waterloo. So how do dams work? This is kind of a duh moment, but if you stop and think, there's two primary things that dams have to do. You have to safely hold water. So we have to look at, what is the dam made of? How are we going to make it hold water the best we can using good soil, clay embankments or concrete structures. We have to have good foundations or abutment conditions and cutoffs to prevent water from going around or under. And then oftentimes we have internal drainage features inside the embankment to make sure they maintain stability. And of course, the other aspect is we have to safely pass water. We can't just store all the water forever. We have to be able to get it around that dam so it doesn't compromise the stability. So we have spillways and outlet works that do that. Go through some basic parts of the dam. Obviously, all the water upstream of a dam composes the reservoir. Then we have typically some kind of principal spillway. This can be, in this case, it's a pipe, and we have a riser in this drawing. And we have an upstream slope. We have a crest, which is our top of our dam. Groin is what we refer to as the kind of the area that the dam meets the natural ground or the abutment. We have outlet works where the water typically flows out. And then most embankment dams, I shouldn't say most of our larger ones will have some kind of internal drains that help contain any kind of seepage. And those will have outfalls. So for our dam owners and operators on the line, oftentimes you'll see smaller pipe outlets near your outlets, and those are draining your internal drains. And then most of the time we have an auxiliary or emergency spillway around the side of a dam. This is a similar drawing that shows the parts. Once again, we have the crest here, but this one kind of provides a cutaway. So I talked a little bit about internal features of a dam. This sort of demonstrates that when we build an embankment dam, we oftentimes do a trench into the foundation to provide a good cutoff. We can have a core, which is our best clays, to provide as much water tightness as we can. And then if we don't have enough clay to fill the whole dam, we can do other materials in the upstream and downstream shells. And then we can provide filters, and these are often made of sand and gravel to catch any kind of, if we have seepage coming through the dam, we can drain that out safely instead of saturating the downstream slope. So let's talk a little bit about spillways. Spillways obviously are needed. We got to get water over or through the dam. And spillway sizes you'll see vary a lot from dam to dam. And why is that? Why don't we just have one size? Well, it depends a lot on the watershed size. How much water do we have draining into our lake? Larger the watershed, typically we're going to need larger spillways. However, if we have more lake storage available, we can have smaller spillways. I'll show a demo of that in a minute. We kind of refer to that as the watershed ratio. We're looking at watershed to lake size. So if we have 100 acres draining into a 10-acre pond, that'd be a 10-to-1 watershed ratio. Usually we want between 10 to 40 to 50, kind of on the high end of watershed ratios is kind of where you want to be for most economical spillway sizing and sediment load and those sorts of things. But obviously we have a lot that go outside of those ranges for different purposes. Typical practice, as we looked on the previous drawing, is to have two spillways for our dams. We have what we call a principal spillway. These are the spillways that handle the continuous flows, the base flows to the dam. They're usually made of concrete or steel, and they can be controlled or uncontrolled. Controlled means that we may have a gate that needs to go up or down depending on the flow. Uncontrolled means as the water level comes in and the water level starts to rise, more water flows out of the pipe, but nobody has to do anything. And then as we talked about, auxiliary spillways are Typically, we also call them emergency spillways. They're not supposed to be used very often because typically they're built just on grassed waterways. So these can succumb to some erosion, but that's okay because we're only going to use them on an infrequent basis. So they're a little less expensive to build, but we can pass a lot of flows, but we may have to do some repairs after large flood events. So I thought this image was kind of useful when we think about capacity of lakes and spillways. If you think of it like a bathtub, if you're putting more water into your bathtub than your outlet drain can keep up with, let's say it's getting clogged, you're taking a shower, you notice the bathtub starts to fill up. That's because we've got more water coming in than can go out the drain. And so the lake fills. Same thing with the lake. If we don't have enough principal spillway capacity, we see the lake rise to a point where it's going to overflow. So the bigger the bathtub, you know, the smaller the pipe could be and how much water we can store before we need to overflow it. Here's some examples of spillways around Iowa. We've got a couple concrete chutes here. These are typically built right on the dam, and they just provide water passing over the dam down the back slope. Sometimes they're built to the side as well. Then we have spillway pipes that basically go straight through a dam. There's one steel here and there's one concrete. Those just kind of project up to the water level. And then oftentimes we'll put a riser on our spillway pipe, and the risers can add capacity to our spillway inlets, more capacity than just a pipe alone would have. And then some other spillway types. We have some masonry spillway up at Beads Lake in northern Iowa to the left there. And then we have concrete weir. And this is an example of a controlled spillway at Lake Panorama. We have a gate that can rise and lower as they need to pass more water out of the lake. And this is, like I said, I'd give you some examples. There's a nice 10-minute video on Dams 101 that has some better animations and things that I could put into this PowerPoint today. But I encourage you, if you have the time, you could check this out. Nice little YouTube video. You could also share it with other staff and owners and stuff that kind of walks through the basics of a dam. So with that, I don't know if we had any questions at this point and just the real basics of dams.
We did not.
Okay.
We had one. Oh, no. We had one question asking where we will post the webinar recordings.
Okay. We're planning to post those on the same website you went to register, the iowadnr.gov/dams. It's the plan. Like I said, a couple hands raised, but like I said, if you can type your question at this point, I'll probably do that. And we may try some unmuting later on if we have time. Yep. Yeah, if you have to leave early, we'll post those videos. All right, we'll keep on. We'll have a couple more question breaks. So if you think of something, or if your hand raised, go ahead and try to type those in, or if you want to wait till the end, we'll try to do some unmuting and see how that works out. All right. So now I want to pivot a little bit to about, now I know why we have dams and what types, and kind of know they're everywhere. So let's talk about dam safety programs, how they got started and where we're at today. So we started building dams in the US, really in the 1800s. And early on, we didn't have a lot of best practices. You just hoped you had a good engineer that maybe studied under someone or did some good research or had good intuition, because there wasn't as many guidelines, and there certainly wasn't very many regulations and things about where and how you could build dams. Let's see, I've got some. Oops. Okay, never mind. All right, so I was going to launch another poll now about dam failures. So the poll is, how many estimated deaths related to dam failures have we had in the United States? Kind of curious what see what you guys think. Give that another few seconds here. All right, close that out. So most of you definitely think we've had over 100. Many over 300, about half over 1,000, and about a third of you think over 3,000. So let's dive into the history a little bit. So kind of our first major wake-up call as to the impacts that dams could have was in 1889. The South Fork Dam in Johnstown, Pennsylvania flooded, and we saw about 2,200 deaths for that flood event. It was a major flood event as well as a dam failure. And then 1911, the Bayless Dam in Pennsylvania then flooded, another concrete dam that's down here on the left, failed. And so that kind of started people saying, hey, we gotta do something about this. We need some dam safety. And so Pennsylvania passed some dam safety legislation shortly after. In 1928, the St. Francis Dam in California failed, and that's on the lower right here. Very significant dam failure, large concrete dam, couldn't stand up to the pressures and killed over 600 estimated people in 1928. So, and I went ahead and put a couple notes about Iowa's history in here too, even though we didn't have a significant dam failure or anything like that early last century, but the 1950s is when Iowa's floodplain management program first started. And then as we talked, as we'll see in future slides, in the late 1970s, when nationally the national dam safety programs were going, is when probably we could say that Iowa started up an official dam safety program. And like I mentioned, in the 70s, some key events also happened. We had a Teton Dam failure, which was a really large Bureau of Reclamation dam, failed upon first filling. Canyon Lake in South Dakota, Laurel Run, another Pennsylvania dam, Buffalo Creek in West Virginia, and Kelly Barnes. And we'll talk about those last two in a little bit more detail here, because they kind of spearheaded some national legislation. So 1972, we had the Buffalo Creek Dam failed, and it released 130 million gallons of water and sludge. It was a coal slurry impoundment, and that killed 125 people, destroyed 500 homes. Here's some photos that I'll flip through of that were historic photos. So kind of reinforces that anytime we hold significant amounts of water, we can cause a lot of damage downstream. as most of you have seen, even non-dam related flooding can have significant impacts. So that kind of led to nationally, really, unfortunately, a lot of our dam safety history results from failures, right? We have a failure, just like anything, floods, these sorts of things, then people say we have to do something about this. So in 1972, there was some laws passed that said, hey, we need to figure out where all these dams are in the United States and start inspecting them. So in the early 1970s, they found 49,000 dams and determined that about 20,000 of those could cause loss of life downstream. A lot of states really didn't have a program or anything, so they no one had really gone and done an inventory. And this legislation also said, hey, Army Corps of Engineers, we're putting you in charge of going out, finding these and inspecting these. But like as a lot of things that happen at the federal government level, they said we should do this, but they never provided funding. So initially in the early 70s, they didn't go in and do formal inspections of those. So follow up in 77, presidential memo saying, hey, where are we at with dam safety? What's going on? At the time, they weren't quite sure what to do with non-federal dams, right? Kind of that, what involvement should the federal government have with privately owned things? And as we talked about, there really wasn't any funding, so these inspections had never been performed that were authorized in 1972. So then in 1977, we have another significant dam failure. This Kelly Barnes Dam was originally built in the late 1930s, 1940. It wasn't very tall, only 38 feet, but was situated such that it sat right above a Bible college. And it failed in the middle of the night after heavy rain and killed 39 people. So you can see on this image here, we've got kind of the dam sits up here right above campus, so it kind of flows down a hilly area and through a valley that campus kind of was constructed right along the creek downstream. And the inset picture here, you can kind of see, it probably wasn't very well built to start with, and wasn't maintained over the years as well. So it was kind of just a ticking time bomb. But what made this dam especially relevant as well is that, as you'll recall, President Carter was in office and he's from Georgia. And the First Lady Rosalynn was able to be at the disaster site within hours that next day. So she personally toured the devastation. And I think this is even some of her notes that are in the archives. So obviously now we had presidential direct interest in a dam failure on their watch. And so now President Carter's saying, hey, enough's enough. We gotta do something to prevent this in the future. So once again, the Army Corps of Engineers was told, hey, we got to get started on inspecting these 9,000 non-federal dams around the country. And that also meant that it wasn't just all put in the Corps' hands. It basically said, hey, states, you have to step up too. You got to get some dam safety programs, start to inventory your dams and start to provide inspections and permitting, those sorts of things. So that brings us to current day. All states except Alabama have official dam safety programs and requirements. The federal government does help provide those states with assistance through some grants throughout the states. And our national inventory of dams is up to over 90,000, as you can see in this picture here. So we kind of have lots of dams. Iowa, I think we're 5th or 6th in the ranking of dams. So even though we're a smaller state, we do have quite a large set of dams. So that brings us to Iowa. So our dam safety program in Iowa, and you can see our map here of our dams. So what do we do here at the DNR? We inventory 4,100 dams. We do permit dam construction and modifications. We have an inspection program, and we average about 80 official inspections a year. And then we're always looking at risk analysis and owner education. So we have we maintain our own inventory, and I mentioned there's a national inventory, and the way that works is the states and other federal partners all send their data to the Corps about every 2 years. They're trying to get that to every year, but about every 2 years, everybody sends it to the Corps compiles it, and there is a website where you can access all of the national dam inventory. But I want to point out that we have our inventory in a new sort of web-based database, and we're doing really good on time. So I'm going to try to switch over and just kind of show you our database here. So let me see what you're seeing. Okay. So if you go to that link I just showed you, and that link will also be in our handout, and it's on our website for our inventory, but we do have a publicly accessible part of it. And this provides you to look at the entire list of 4,162 dams that we put in here over the years. But it also has a handy search feature that you can, if you're in a town or you want to type in a zip code or address, specific address, and what range, and see what dams are near you, or if you're looking for a specific dam to get information about it. And that will provide a little map feature here, which is handy. And you can click on the dams to get more information. So if I pull up Great Lake Dam here in Osceola, hopefully the fun of live demos. All right. So it gives you a little map that you can zoom in and out of, and you can make, you can even turn on the aerial here, zoom in and take a closer look. You can also click this link. It'll take you to Google Maps for that dam. And we provide some of the basic information publicly. So you can get the permit number for the dam. You can see what its hazard classification, which we'll talk about later. We do put the owner name, but we don't provide any owner contact information that we keep on our locked side. But we do provide last inspection date by the DNR and our condition assessment of it. So that is publicly accessible, and then some of the basic numbers for the dam you can see here as well. You can also get, for dams that have them, we do provide publicly the breach inundation maps. So a rough estimate of what could be flooded downstream if the dam were to suddenly fail. And then we provide our records at the DNR are public records. So we go ahead and we've scanned those for many of our dams, not all of them, maybe only 200 or 300 dams are actively in here with files. The rest you'd have to request from us for our smaller dams. And so you can pull up past inspection reports and past correspondence and those sorts of things. Since those are public records, we go ahead and post those directly on this website. And I'll go ahead and open this inundation map. We'll talk more about this toward the end of today's webinar, but you can pull up where we have them, some maps of potential impact. Now I'll switch back. Here we go. Should take over. I'll put me back at the beginning now. Let's see. All right. So as the DNR, we don't just do anything we want. Everything's provided for in code. So The reason we have a dam safety program in Iowa is because the Iowa code provides for it. It's code listing here. That's a pretty generic law. So then the DNR provides rules that implement that statute and says how we're going to have floodplain and dam regulations. And so we put those in administrative rules. And those are available in these chapters, section 567 of Iowa Administrative Code, chapter 70 to 73 for our floodplain and dam construction. And then water storage and water use is provided in chapters 51 and 52. And since you're storing water, that also crosses into our water use program. And so you need a water storage permit in many cases. So what do we regulate in Iowa? We have, this is our, our current list of what size dams need permits or we provide oversight for at the DNR. And this is kind of a overwhelming list, so I'm gonna kind of step you through this in the next few slides. So first question is, how big of a creek or river are you gonna dam up? So if you're on a creek that drains more than 10 square miles, basically you're on a stream or river that anything you do would need a floodplain permit. So we have this overarching drainage area criteria that says you're on a major stream. If you're going to build a dam, if you're going to do work on the bank, if you're going to build a home next to it or whatever, that would need permitting. So that also applies to dams. But regardless of drainage area, we're going to look at how tall of a structure are you going to build and how much water is going to be stored behind it. So we're getting back into that potential of how much water is being stored, because the more water you store, the more potential damages you could do downstream. So 18 acre feet is the current criteria for normal storage. So this is the, let me turn my little pointer on again here. So our top of dams here, normally we have water level, obviously not at our top of dam. So this is our permanent pool where our spillway would be. And that's any dam that's at least 18 acre feet. And we also look at how much water could that dam store if we filled it up to the very top of the dam. So if it completely fills up, what is that number? And if that's greater than 50 acre feet or 25 acre feet without emergency spillway, that needs a permit. So I'm talking about acre feet, and I really didn't dive into that yet. That's just a volume that you could think of as 1 acre of land 1 foot deep. So it's just a convenient volume unit that we use when we're talking about dams. We also have some additional criteria if you're going to build a dam in a city or near a city. So as we talked about before, if you're on a stream that drains more than 2 square miles through an urban area, that's going to need any kind of permit for any kind of construction through the DNR floodplain program. So that applies to dams as well. So anything you're doing in the floodplain, if it's greater than 2 square miles and in a city. However, even if you're not on a major stream and you're going to build a dam that's at least 10 feet tall and stores 10 acre feet at the top, you'll need a permit from us. So a little bit tighter criteria, just because dams inside cities can have some special impacts. So a little more history on dam construction in the US. We really got, in Iowa, got distracted. Really in the 50s, 60s, 70s is when we got really started on building a lot of our smaller ponds and lakes and things around the state. But we're continuing on, adding quite a few every year still. Most of our dams in Iowa kind of range from 20 feet to 50 feet. So most of them are in between 20 and 40 feet. So mostly these smaller earth embankment dams. But we do have quite a few, half a dozen or so over 100 feet. And those include the core reservoirs and also some of our larger state park dams. So I was going to launch another poll here, see if you're all awake. All right. So this one says, deals with dam ownership and how many dams do you think in Iowa are federally or state owned? We do have some question break coming up soon, so I think we have a few maybe we'll discuss. Okay, let's see. All right, I'll go ahead and close that. Oh, a couple more coming in. See, I catch some of you off guard and I catch snoozing. All right, I'll share that. So, state and federally owned dams in Iowa. A few of you think that most of the dams are state and federally owned, about 5% of you. About a tenth think about half are state and federal. A third think that about a third. Another third over 10%, and a few of you think 5%. So I'm going to hide that. Go back to our slideshow here. And here's our pie chart. So we've got actually about half of our dams in Iowa are completely privately owned. So no government involvement whatsoever. And then the other about half of our dams are actually under city or local government. So cities, counties, and this also includes soil and water conservation districts, which maybe I'll give some of you the benefit of the doubt that you thought some of those might be under federal since they're NRCS, but really NRCS dams are typically built with federal dollars and then handed over to these local soil and water conservation districts, which are more classified as a local government. So kind of a trick question in a way, just to, because a lot of people think, oh, dams, those are federal and state, they take care of those. But a big part of why we have dam safety programs is because we do have so many private dams. And so the whole point is to keep an eye on those and make sure we can reduce the risk for downstream people. So the answer was 5%, or even actually, I think that it's about 4.8 or 4.6 if you do the math here. So really less than 5% are actual state and federally owned dams. But those, of course, are the bigger ones that you do tend to think of, like Saylorville and Brushy Creek Dam, Pleasant Creek, all of our large state park dams as well. So that brings us to our second question break here. So we do have a lot of time. I'll probably end around 1 or so. I probably have another 10 minutes or so we can also open up for audio questions. I set aside 2 hours for these, but wasn't quite sure how long we'd take to cover this first topic.
We do have a lot of questions that have came in.
Okay.
If we go back, sorry, it scrolled on me. I just lost it. We had our second poll about the number of deaths. And then the next 2 slides listed the dam names, and then there was a number in parentheses. Was that the number of deaths?
Yeah. Yep. That was the deaths estimated for those dam failures.
And then we had another question on the inventory. Are the dams in the inventory only those that were large enough to require a permit, or is it all dams regardless of size?
Okay, good question. Yeah, I don't have a slide on the inventory criteria, which is, it's similar to our permit criteria, but you'll notice there was a slide early on where I said state regulated dams and inventory dams, and there's about 100 or 200 different. And yeah, the national criteria for putting dams in the inventory is basically any dam over 25 feet and any dam over 50 acre feet is kind of the basic criteria. So they're similar. They usually meet both our criteria and the national. But yeah, the actual inventory criteria for the Corps of Engineers held national inventory is a little bit different. And we're considering switching our permit criteria to match up with that.
Oh man, we got lots of questions.
That's good. Glad you guys are.
Lowhead, there's a bunch of questions on lowhead dams.
Okay.
I'll read them and they're all similar. Do you do anything with lowhead dams? Where do lowhead dams fit into the dam type? How do lowhead dams factor into dams overall in Iowa?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I guess that's three.
Yeah. So, and I'll mention them a little bit more toward the end because I probably should put that up front to talk about those. Mostly on this presentation, we're talking about our embankment dams, which are usually our clay embankments. Lowhead dams obviously are a big part of our infrastructure in Iowa as well. And for those on the call that don't know what we're talking about, so a lowhead dam is basically the dams that are built across a river or stream. They're almost always concrete nowadays. Sometimes they start out as rock dams or timber crib dams, we call them. And they were used for a lot of times for mills back in the turn of the century. Now some of them are used for water supply, some are just for recreation. And those do have their own unique issues with those, especially safety at the dam. We do get a lot of drownings at those dams because of their recirculating currents and those sorts of things. So I don't spend a lot of time on this webinar talking about those. I will provide, the DNR does have a designated water trails program that looks at lowhead dams, has done an inventory in the past and provides those on an interactive map for canoers and kayakers to be aware of. And the reason we kind of separate that is because really the rules that we work under in our floodplain and dam safety program are really looking to protect downstream properties from a dam failure. So these lowhead dams usually are, maybe they're up to 20 feet tall. Usually they're less than that, usually around maybe average of 10. If they were to wash out, they provide a little bit of a flood wave downstream, but they don't provide, or they don't usually cause a huge flood. Their real hazard is in people that are maybe recreating near them and not aware of them and aware of the dangers of those. So they do cause, unfortunately, a lot of drowning deaths. And at the DNR, we do have a program that's working to help remove those and convert those to safer structures that you've probably heard of in Manchester and Charles City and things, where we're converting them to whitewater runs and those sorts of things. So that could certainly be a whole nother topic. If there's a lot of interest in that, we could get our staff that works with those directly and talk more about those. But oftentimes they do meet the inventory criteria, so they most of them will show up in our inventory, so you can look at them. They don't usually have a formal inspection program on those, but some might have historical inspections on them. And there definitely are a big issue nationally and in Iowa, and we're slowly trying to take care of those. But yeah, I didn't put a lot of time into today's webinar for those because they are kind of a unique and special topic. Do
you have slides coming up on inspections?
Yep. Yep, we're going to talk about inspections next, I think.
Okay, there's a lot of questions on inspections that we'll wait on.
Okay.
Permitting. Are there, where did that question go? Are there ever situations where you deny a permit application?
Do you want to talk about that one? Casey does a lot of our current reviews, but
I don't think we've ever denied a permit application. We always work it out with the engineer.
yeah, I mean, it's I guess that's a hard way to answer, because basically we do deny it when they first send in an application and it doesn't meet our criteria, or it's not showing, you know, best design practices. We'll basically say to that applicant, hey, here are ways to make it better, and here are ways that you can make it better so it can meet our approval. So that's we do work with applicants, people that want to build a dam. In a way, we deny it because they don't get a permit until we're happy that it meets all of our criteria. But it's an iterative process where we provide comments back and we work out and make sure they're aware of the current best practices for designs. And we can always
I think
run through more
questions.
Okay. Well, and like I said, feel free to type it in again, or we'll try to go live. I think we'll have time at the end as well to open up some audio. But we are going to talk more about inspections and things next. So, all right. Here we go, inspections. So what our administrative rules say that, and I'll talk a little bit more about what a high hazard dam is and that sort of thing coming up. It's always kind of odd to, you know, what order do I put these in, but so our high hazard dams are inspected every 2 years by the department. And then we have a category of major dams, we call it, which get inspected every 5 years, which is most of our significance and some of our real large low hazard dams. And then dams that, you know, an owner has reached out and says, hey, there's something wrong, I think, with this dam, or can you take a look? Or if we've noted something wrong, we may do a follow-up on a yearly basis, or even 6 months if depending on the severity of the issue. So we certainly go out more often as we need to, but for routine inspections where things haven't really changed, the dam seems to be in good shape, those are our primary schedules. And so that works out to about that 80 a year or so. Like you saw, we have about 95 high hazard. If we take off the federal dams that we don't inspect, that leaves us around 87 or 88, I think, right now. So we do about half of those every year. And then we have about a couple hundred other dams that are on a 5-year schedule. So that gives us about 40 and 40. And of course, that can range all the way up to 100 depending on the year in special dams. So, but one of the bullets on the bottom of the slide that I've put in here is that, you know, really on a regular schedule, a regular basis, we only inspect probably less than 10% of our inventory of dams. So that's kind of why we're doing like what we're doing today. We really do rely on our dam owners as well to try to maintain their dams properly and make sure they're aware. So all of those smaller dams throughout the state are really in the hands of their owner that we're trying to educate on proper maintenance. We have sort of modernized in the last couple of years. We use a tablet inspection system which puts out better, and the software's gotten better over the last couple of years too. So we can produce some kind of neat reporting now that includes photos from the inspection, and it puts them right in the report for us. We can circle issues. The report can kind of highlight things that are deficient, and so it kind of gives it at a quick glance, you can quickly see things that need to be addressed at the dam. And so these reports go out after we're done. And I wanted to point out, this is a really good free webinar put out by the Association of State Dam Safety Officials. It's a 2-hour webinar, basically like this one, but it's fully dedicated to inspecting dams for dam owners. So the dam owners and operators on the call, I would encourage you, this is a free resource that really goes into details of how to conduct a good inspection of your dam, what to look for, also sort of reiterates the parts of a dam and those sorts of things again. But another really good resource I would point you at. And that used to be something they charged for at the association, but they felt that that's such an important thing to get out to our owners and operators that that's now free and on YouTube. So definitely take advantage of that. I would encourage you to watch that. So if we talk about hazard class, and I've talked a little bit about it up till now. So we need to rate each dam based on what happens if it fails. So we have to kind of estimate using our best tools available to kind of say, well, what would be flooded if this dam gave way quickly? And it's a very inexact science in a lot of ways, because we don't know, dam embankments can fail very slowly, they can fail very quickly, they can fail at a normal pool, they could fail when it's filled up to the top. And so we have to take a lot of different things into consideration and scenarios and kind of come up with some different mapping and impacts. And so they get rated as 3 different classifications, low, significant, and high. Iowa code or Iowa administrative rules pick the term moderate instead of significant. So you'll see me use those, and you'll see at the DNR we use those kind of interexchanged because like I said, on the national level it's always called significant. In our rules it's called moderate, but they mean basically the same thing. And and anytime you call a dam, hey, that's a high hazard dam, that almost makes it sound like, well, that dam's about ready to fail, or that dam is high risk, and it's not really the case. It doesn't really have anything to do with the actual condition of the dam. It's really just on the downstream consequences. So actually a high hazard dam is usually a better maintained dam because we have very stringent criteria for those, and we inspect them frequently. So it really doesn't reflect the condition. And why is it important? Because we have different design criteria for each classification. So a low hazard rural dam is going to have very basic criteria because there's very little at risk. So we're not going to make that more expensive to construct. Whereas a high hazard dam, if we've got lives at risk, we're going to have a lot more stringent criteria to reduce that dam can never overtop or ever fail. Kind of gets broken down into a few basic criteria. There's a little more to it, but this sort of summarizes it well. We look at is loss of life expected if that dam fails. So low hazard dams, we would definitely say no. But we also say there really isn't going to be any other significant impacts, economic or public damages downstream of a low hazard. Significant hazard, we still don't think that the flooding would be significant enough to cause likely loss of life. Now, we never know for sure if there's someone in the wrong place at the wrong time, but it wouldn't be likely, so in a significant hazard dam. But we do see that we are going to have significant flooding to structures. So those structures could be public utilities, they could be homes, it could be businesses, warehouses, and we're going to have damages, but we don't think the flooding is deep enough or severe enough that we would expect people to lose their life. The only criteria for a high hazard dam basically is that loss of life is likely to occur. So, and that's basically one life in Iowa. Some states will say a few, some states will categorize that, but for us it just takes one. So just some examples. Low hazard dam obviously is more of our rural dams, really not much downstream. Significant hazards, here's an example of one in Des Moines area. We have the dam actually consists of the highway, so that provides some immediate damage if the dam / roadway were lost. And that, loss of life could occur if it occurs at the wrong time, but we, it's really not as likely on a smaller road, slower speed road. And then we've determined that the channel downstream is such that, and the height of this dam is such that the flood that would occur from a failure wouldn't really flood anybody so severe that we would expect loss of life, but there could be some damages to some buildings downstream. And they're kind of scattered throughout the state. Our high hazards, here's one of the most obvious ones, Saylorville Lake upstream of Des Moines, one of our largest. Same would apply to Coralville or Red Rock. But we also have a lot of smaller high hazards as well, just above a handful of homes that would be significant or would be high hazard. So obviously if Saylorville Lake failed, we would see significant loss of life in the Des Moines metro. Yeah, and I did put an example of a smaller dam. So this is a small flood control dam in Ottumwa. I believe it's a dry dam primarily, but if that filled up and failed, we would see significant flooding throughout the city of Ottumwa. It could have caused loss of life. So range in size all the way from Saylorville to smaller flood control dams. And those are kind of scattered as well, although you'll see them a little more clumped in our larger metro areas where we have those impacts. And this isn't a one and done situation. Hazard classification always depends on what's downstream. So if conditions change downstream, then the hazard classification has to change. So if we observe or are notified that there's a new development, if things have changed, if we do better analysis than we could do 20 years ago, and determine that in fact things are, flooding is better or flooding is worse, we can change the hazard classification. So it's a fairly fluid classification. We are constantly looking at dams and saying, hey, is this one really high now that we can do some better hydraulic modeling? Or hey, there's development below this one, we need to take a new look at it. And so along with that goes changes to the design criteria. So if a dam does get upgraded to high hazard, that dam can now become deficient and need construction work on it to make it safer, to reduce the risk of failure. It might need a larger spillway, might need to raise the dam to hold more water without overtopping, or lower the pool to provide more storage. Sometimes it's too expensive to rehabilitate the dam to meet that criteria, and if it's not really serving a strong purpose anymore, it can be taken out. So and I'll kind of, let's see if this so a little animation here that I'll talk through. So it just kind of shows what would have been a rural dam or a low hazard dam, most likely built at some point in the past. A lot of times dams bring development, or this might have been independent. So we see development occurring after the dam was built downstream. We see industry and residential. During this time, a lot of times cities would regulate the 100-year floodplain, but typically we haven't prevented development in breach zones. So the actual breach zone of a dam can be quite a bit larger flooding area than the 100-year floodplain. So that's kind of an example of what we call hazard creep, is when we get development downstream of a dam inside its breach zone. And that would cause, now that dam would most likely be a high hazard dam in what was a low hazard dam. So it's going to need some upgrades. And pop me right out of my PowerPoint. Okay. So next thing I wanted to cover is another thing. Now that we're talking about high hazard dams, what is one of our ways to reduce the risk of loss of life and reduce those consequences if something were to happen? So in addition to having the stringent design criteria for high hazard dams, we also encourage and require emergency action plans for those dams. And so we're trying to get these into the hands of all of our high hazard dam owners. And an emergency action plan basically does a couple things. As you saw, a lot of our dams are privately owned, and that includes our high hazard dams. A lot of them, half of those are privately owned as well. And so we're trying to help that owner know, okay, what do I do if something's going wrong? Something unusual is happening. I've noticed something new. I don't know how serious it is. When do I know whether to call 911 or just call the state, or it's just a normal thing that happens? So these plans outline those things. And on the other hand, they also help emergency managers and emergency officials. We get them in their hands as well. And so that when they do get a call from a dam owner, it's not the first time they've heard of this dam, and they also know what's downstream of it and what's at risk. So we typically includes these breach and adjacent maps, so that emergency management officials can develop evacuation areas. Might have been a time slide. So that's kind of EAPs in a nutshell, and we could do a future talk just on EAPs. A lot to go through for those, but I just want to make you aware that those are out there. So that kind of wraps up the formal part of our presentation today. Some of the takeaways that I wanted to get across with this webinar are just that we do indeed have a large number of dams in Iowa. They serve a wide variety of interests in the state. Dams can and do fail and cause damage downstream if not properly constructed and maintained, so it's important. I didn't put a bullet here, but the owner is liable for those damages, so it's important that owners are aware of that and their responsibilities. And then we do have a program here at the state that helps regulate those dams to try to reduce those risks of failures. Some additional resources, and I've mentioned some of these throughout the talk, but wanted to point them out specifically. One of the great resources for dam owners and operators is the Association of State Dam Safety Officials, and that the name of it's a nonprofit association that's really geared toward dam safety across the country. It's not just regulators, it's got a huge membership of dam owners and consultants, and I encourage you to check out membership of that. It's not very expensive. But even if you're not a member, they provide a lot of good resources. And these are 3 websites that are all part of that association. One they've set up just called damowner.org that provides a lot of resources, and they're posting more and more videos as well that are useful, and documents and resources and those sorts of things. A few years ago, they started a website called damfailures.org, and I touched upon just 2 significant dam failures in this talk. But as you saw on that map, like someone asked about for the 1970s, we had a half dozen failures. I believe all of those are on there. It's actually the website's called Dam Failures and Lessons Learned. And so it's not just, it's what can we take away from each failure. So it says, this dam didn't have enough capacity. So the lesson learned is to make sure we have enough spillway capacity, or there's other design features that we've learned about from each dam failure. So really interesting interactive website. I would encourage you to check out. A lot of videos, photos, different dams in there, and they're actually actively adding new ones to it. So every year they try to add a few more on there. And then their main website is damsafety.org. So that's a good resource for all things dam safety related. So, and then on the DNR front, I touched upon this just a little bit earlier, but I'm glad the questions came up about low head dams, because they are very important as well, and a major effort by the department to work on those. Most of those are privately owned as well. The state does own a few, but a lot of those are county owned or privately owned, and so trying to work out ownership and who's going to maintain them is a constant issue as well. But if you're curious about the DNR's program for those, there's a web link there dedicated to low head dams, sort of some of the initiatives we're doing at the DNR. And then there's another really good resource. So we're engineers, so we're not very good at answering questions about, hey, weeds are taking over my pond, or what fish should I put in there, or those sorts of things. But obviously at the DNR we have a lot of fisheries experts, and so they've put together a nice website called Iowa Ponds, and they want to promote fishing and good water quality. So there's some good resources on there about how to stock your pond, where to find stocking. The DNR doesn't stock ponds anymore like they used to, but there are enough private hatcheries around that they can point you at to help you get your pond in good shape on those sorts of things. So if you do have questions about vegetation or weed control, those sorts of things, I would encourage you to go to that website, and you can also contact directly some of our fisheries staff and ask those questions. So, I'm out of breath all of a sudden, talking too much. Need to breathe more. So that kind of brings us to our final question break here. Do we want to be brave? And
I've got a short list of questions that have come in already.
Okay, let's go through those, and then if I don't answer the question there, then you can use the raise your hand feature, and we'll see if we can unmute your line and you can ask it directly. But
sounds good. So there's one. Is there a situation where you prevent a landowner or local government from building a dam, for example, due to downstream or upstream impacts?
Typically, well, all right, let's start with the downstream impacts. So typically there isn't a prohibition. It would just be permitted and have to be designed and constructed as a high hazard dam. So if there was development downstream that would be impacted, it would need that really strict permitting criteria to construct it. Now on the upstream side, you can't build a dam and back up water on someone else's land without an easement. So that would prohibit a permit if the top of your dam, if it filled up to the top of the dam and flooded someone upstream. That's an illegal taking, and you would have to have an easement, and we check for those when we do permits. So we look at that elevation contour and require those owners to get easements. So upstream, yes. Downstream, it almost seems kind of backward, but downstream, like I say, we try to reduce the risk as much as we can with our stricter criteria, but you can build a dam upstream of someone.
And there's a couple questions kind of about the Corps, the Army Corps. How have the federal changes in the U.S. water definition affected dam permit requirements and determinations? And what is your relationship like with the Army Corps?
Okay. So we're pretty independent. So there's kind of two questions there. As far as waters of the U.S. and some of those changes, that's completely independent, I guess, of our permit criteria. So when you apply for a permit from the DNR for really any work in the floodplain, including dams, the Corps of Engineers also gets a copy of that, and they're going to be looking for impacts to waters of the U.S. and impacts to fish and wildlife and those sorts of things. And so they do their thing, which falls under the waters of the U.S. and the Clean Water Act and those sorts of things. And I know there's been some changes recently on some of that. And I'm not an expert in that at all. So really it's independent. On the dam safety side of things, we sort of have a loose relationship with the Corps. There's a couple dams that we overlap regulation-wise, but usually if it's a federally owned and operated dam, they have jurisdiction over it and we don't. It's kind of how that stands. So we aren't responsible for inspecting Saylorville Lake, Coralville Lake, Red Rock, Rathbun, and all their dams that go with that, and the lock-in dams. So we don't regulate anything federally owned. So mostly we don't really have any direct relationship as far as the federal laws are the federal laws and the state laws are the state laws when it comes to dam safety.
Now switching to emergency action plans, where can you access an emergency action plan for a dam?
So typically those haven't been made public. If you're the owner or a local official or something, will work with you on that. We're working on some new potentially, and we've just started to play with potentially online EAPs. They're usually not as publicly available because as part of those plans, we put in a lot of people's personal contact information, their personal cells, their addresses, all those sorts of things, because the people involved with that dam need to be able to get a hold of each other in the event of emergency. So it includes some personal information. So we haven't really posted those publicly, but we do make those available to emergency management and dam owners. And we're working on a system where we could provide 95% of the information from that emergency action plan without providing that personal information to the public. So using that same public database system we have, we're working on a new system that anybody could go and look at that template and the bulk of the information for that dam. And like I said, we do provide the actual breach inundation map. So if you're interested in it, if you're in a breach zone below a dam, we're trying to make more and more of those available as well.
And a follow-up from the same person, as an owner, how can I get the emergency action plan for my dam?
All right. If you're a high hazard dam, definitely reach out to us. If you're a significant or a low hazard dams, we haven't really, we don't really do them for low hazard dams. There's just not as much to put in there or concern. But if you're one of our dams that we inspect, definitely just follow up with us. Shoot me or Casey an email, and we'd love to work with you. And we can also point you at templates to get started if we don't have one started for your dam. So we've got some templates and resources that will help you develop one for your dam.
And then an administrative question, will any of the webinars be suitable for continuing education for engineering PDHs?
We haven't really set up to provide any kind of certification for continuing ed. We've thought about it maybe for the week 4, where we're really going to get technical for our engineers, so that would have a lot more technical information. So at this point, we're not doing any kind of certificates, but we may for that last one.
I think we have answered all the questions that came in.
All right. Did anybody want to try a, see, I see Scott. Scott still has your hand up. I will, I'm going to hit the unmute.
It says that's been up for 100 minutes.
Oh, the hand, oh, okay. I think he just dropped it maybe.
Yeah.
And he did, why does that just go black on me? So get back to him now. Okay, I muted him. There we go. Okay. Give it a second here if anybody wants to, if we missed one, like I said, we do have quite a list of typed in questions, and Casey's done a great job going through them, but if there's something if you think we missed or you have a follow-up, certainly you can type it in, or you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Why my slide went dark, okay. As you're thinking about that, I'll just go ahead and mention once again, these are the next 3 webinars that you can sign up for. And we'll continue those. And like I said, we'll get today's recording. Hopefully everything's worked well. This is kind of our first time doing one of these. So it says it's being recorded and our tests have been recorded well. So hopefully everything went okay, and we'll get this posted soon. With that, I'll just thank you all for attending and your interest in dam safety, and don't hesitate to shoot us an email. It's probably the best way to get a hold of us through this time. And before you leave, you can certainly grab those handouts as well in the handout section that included today's slides, and the DAMS 101 handout that includes those links throughout the presentation. So. All right. Let's see. This does not have the tips. Oh, okay. Ivo, thanks for, guess I didn't put, but yeah, just damsafety.org is a great website. I guess I missed that in the handout. I think I missed it because if you actually go to, I think, damowner.org, I think you end up, I think it redirects to the dam owner website on damsafety.org. So either way, you'll end up there if you go through that path. But encourage you to check out ASDSO. I've been involved over the years, and definitely open to ownership or to membership by owners. And it's pretty cheap. I think it's like $100 a year for a membership. So it's has a journal and some conferences and other training opportunities as well. So it's my little plug for ASDSO. Anything else, Casey, you can think of that touch upon?
I don't think so.
All right. Yeah, I don't think I have any kind of survey or follow-up that pops up after this, but you'll get I believe you'll get a follow-up email just thanking you, and you can, I think that'll be from me, so you might be able to respond to that. But either way, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And thank you all once again, and I'll just leave this open for a few minutes if you need to grab any of those downloads. Otherwise, thank you. Hello.